Welcome to Rockland Psychiatric Center's Community Mental Health Scope. With this program, we hope to make you, our viewers, more aware of the vision and mission of Rockland Psychiatric Center, which is hope, respect, and recovery for those with severe and complex mental illnesses, and also to make you more aware of the positive impact of programming in Westchester County. Today we have as a guest somebody who's going to talk about something that very few of us have heard about. Glad to have her with us, LCSW Tina Triburgo, who's going to talk about something that I can't even pronounce, but I find the title really exciting and fascinating. Eye movement, desensitization, reprocessing. Now that's a mouthful, Tina.
Yeah,
so I'll let you go from that. You didn't make it up, but you're a practitioner of it.
Yes.
Tell us something about it.
So, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, also known as EMDR.
That's easier.
Yes, it definitely helps. Was developed in 1989 by a woman named Francine Shapiro. And it uses eye movements, and now we've found any bilateral stimulation. So sometimes in session I'll use knee taps. Some people use buzzers in people's hands, and it's any left, right,
Right.
Uses the movements.
Well, what are you
to process
desensitizing?
trauma.
I mean, what's the purpose of all this?
So, good question. It's for people who have PTSD, so
Yeah.
post-traumatic stress disorder.
Right.
We've also learned you can use it with people suffering from anxieties or phobias. It helps with grief, processing grief. So when we get stuck, so it's basically what happens is when there's a trauma or grief, things get stuck in our bodies. So let's say, for example, there was a rape victim. And the person that raped her had, let's say it was a female, had beer on their breath. She might be at a party talking to someone, they'll have beer on their breath, all of a sudden her body will be triggered. She'll have a heightened startle response, but consciously she might not know why. So then in therapy you start to realize, okay, so what happened, what was the trigger? That's the trigger.
But how does she know that she has this heightened response? She doesn't know what the cause of it is, but how does she know that it's something that's bothering her?
So she might have, her heart might start racing, she might get sweaty palms, she just becomes uncomfortable. So it's really the EMDR helps to connect. So it helps to connect the feeling in your body with the emotion and then process it so it can kind of put it into a safer place.
But how does she know it's something that should be looked after or should be investigated?
Sometimes people don't know.
But
then you go to a therapist who's hopefully a good one and realizes the connection and, you know. So it could be, the way that it was explained to me that I understood it best, let's say someone's walking down the street when they were younger, they were bitten by a dog.
Right.
They hear a dog barking now. They started to get the heightened startle response.
Right.
Their palms get sweaty, the heart starts racing, they can't calm down from it. They stay in that heightened startle response if you have not processed it.
Right.
If you have processed it through EMDR or other ways, and again, a dog bite is not as traumatic as some of the events that we work with. But if you have processed it, it goes from your amygdala, which is that fight or flight part of your brain. It processes through your brain to tell your body it's okay, calm down. So the EMDR rewires our brain so that sort of our heart and our head match up is the way that I say it. Because sometimes we know something, like we know that dog's on a leash, it's not going to bite us. But our body doesn't know it. Our body is still re-experiencing the trauma again and again and again until we process it out.
Okay, suppose the person, you're walking down the street with the person and the person gets excited or has this feeling. And you say, well, you better see a psychologist. What's the difference between going to a psychologist or psychiatrist or psychoanalyst and working through and coming to you or a person like you?
So EMDR is a different type of process. So incorporating the eye movements helps it to process through our body. So there's a protocol. So first, when Francine Shapiro developed it, she had she had an illness. She was diagnosed with cancer.
She's the inventor, the founder of this.
Yes.
There was no such thing as this before her.
Correct.
In the 1980s.
Correct.
This is entirely new. Okay.
Yes, yes. So that's what's also exciting about it. And there has been a little bit of resistance at first because I think we're afraid of new things. You know, people think of psychoanalysis still. When they think, when I tell them I'm a therapist, they think people come in and lay on the couch. But that's not the type of therapy that I do. I do psychodynamic work.
But the resistance was put up, what, by the medical professionals or what?
Well, in the beginning, when they first started doing more and more research, those people were saying, what is this? I mean, even some clients sometimes, you know, the first person I ever did it with, she said, I thought you were crazy, you were going to put your fingers in front of my face and I would feel better. She's like, but this really worked. She's like, I cannot believe it. So.
Well, how did they get the name? I mean, that's sort of it's a fascinating name, but you don't know
Right.
what it is by.
Right. So, I mean, one thing that Francine Shapiro does say is that she would have named it something different had she known where it was going to go, because it's certainly a
Where it's
mouthful.
leading to,
Yes,
right.
yes. But she was walking through the park thinking about something that was upsetting her, and something the way the light was coming through the trees. She started kind of moving her eyes back and forth on her own, and she said something sort of clicked, and she was a researcher, she was a therapist, she was going to school, and she
Okay.
I guess, had the wherewithal to realize this was
This is
something,
important.
something happened
Something
here.
happened, right.
And so she went back and started doing research on it, and she started practicing on friends. And they say don't practice on your friends, like when you're in the training. They say that's
Right.
kind of, at this
And
point.
why is that?
Because let's say you have a friend who's afraid of elevators, and you do
Right.
it on them,
Right.
and then some childhood molestation comes up. Now you're with your friend, and now it's not necessarily a safe environment in the same way that a therapist's office would be.
Yeah.
So I'm really hesitant to ever do it on like friends or family. I suggest that they get a practitioner. I'll refer them to someone, but I wouldn't necessarily do it on someone that I know personally. But I've used it on many of my clients who have different kinds of trauma, PTSD, rape, childhood molestation, sexual assault.
Now, your background is social work, is that correct? Certified social worker. So how
Yes.
did you get into this, which is quasi-medical and quasi-something else? How did you get
I guess
into it?
the influence of some good people. I started off as an intern at this Women's Resource Center. It's the Putnam Northern Westchester Women's Resource Center in Mayapack, and they work with women and children who experience domestic violence. And then I went on to be a therapist there, and my supervisor at the time was trained in EMDR, and she started to talk to me about it, and I was like, maybe there is something to this. And then
Was it geared toward, because it's a women's center, was it more geared toward women's problems as opposed to this wouldn't have happened, say, like at a men's center?
well, actually, one of the first people they used it with were Vietnam vets. So and it's also been approved now. Veterans Affairs has approved it. So they used it in the hospitals now, in the VAs. So those were some of the first people who they were doing it on, because that was a big population who had PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder.
Right.
As well as rape victims was another population
Right.
that was known to have PTSD. So they also used it on them as well.